Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I want to start today's conversation with a scenario. And I have a feeling this is going to sound uncomfortably familiar to a lot of you listening, or at least it'll remind you of someone you know.
Okay, go ahead. Set the scene for us.
All right. Picture a woman, let's say she's roughly 55 years old. For the last, 2 years, she has just felt off. She's tired, but it's not the kind of tired you get after a long hike or a bad night of sleep.
No, it's deeper than that.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
She feels like she's walking through wet cement every single time she climbs a flight of stairs.
Yeah.
And on top of that, she's noticing these strange lapses. She forgets the names of neighbors she's known for a decade. She walks into the kitchen and just stands there, totally blank on why she even came in.
The classic senior moment, or at least that's what she's telling herself it is.
Exactly. But then the physical stuff starts. When she's trying to fall asleep at night, her feet have this weird, low-grade buzzing sensation. Not pain, exactly, but a vibration. Like a cell phone is buzzing under the mattress. She goes to her GP. They run a standard blood panel. CBC, thyroid, all the usual suspects, and everything comes back normal.
Of course.
She goes to a neurologist because of the buzzing. They rule out MS. She sees a therapist because she's feeling weepy and anxious for no reason. And eventually, she gets a label. Maybe it's fibromyalgia. Maybe it's chronic fatigue syndrome. Or maybe the doctor just shrugs and says, look, you're 55. This is just aging.
The infamous wastebasket diagnoses. When we don't know what it is, we blame the patient's age or their stress levels. It's a terrible habit.
Right. But here is the twist. The reality is that this woman is likely suffering from a single reversible biochemical glitch. She's starving for a nutrient that is absolutely critical for life, one that costs pennies to replace.
Right.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into vitamin B12. But looking at the stack of notes you've prepared, this isn't just about taking your vitamins to feel a bit peppier, is it?
No, absolutely not. And I'm so glad you started with that patient narrative, because that is the clinical reality for thousands, if not millions of people right now. We aren't talking about some wellness trend or a biohack. We're talking about what I call the Great Masquerader.
The Great Masquerader. That sounds like a villain from a noir film.
It really acts like one. In the medical world, B12 deficiency is. It's notorious because it is a master of disguise. It mimics everything.
Everything.
I mean it. It looks like early onset Alzheimer's. It mimics the symptoms of multiple sclerosis almost perfectly. It can look like severe clinical depression or even bipolar disorder. And because it wears all these different masks, it is missed constantly.
Okay.
We're looking at data suggesting nearly 15% of the general adult population is deficient.
15%. 1/5. That is a massive slice of the population. That's not a fringe issue. That's a silent epidemic.
It is. And honestly, that 15% figure is likely a very conservative estimate. That's based on blood thresholds that many of us in the field would argue are actually too low. But we'll get into the controversy of testing a bit later.
Okay.
The point is, people are suffering needlessly. And the real tragedy is that the damage isn't just feeling tired. If you let this go on long enough, if you miss that window of opportunity, we are talking about permanent neurological injury.
And that is the stake in the ground for this episode. We aren't just here to tell you to eat more steak, right?
Right.
The mission today is to equip you to spot this masquerader before it does permanent damage. We're going to break down the 7 hidden signs. We'll explain why the standard blood tests your doctor runs are often lying to you. And then we'll look at the protocols for actually fixing it.
Exactly. Because in this game, time is tissue. The longer you wait, the harder it is to reverse the damage to your nervous system.
So let's pop the hood. Before we get into the scary symptoms, I want to understand the machine. What actually is vitamin B12? And why did you refer to it in your notes as the engine oil of the biological machine? I love that analogy.
It's the best one I've found, really. So vitamin B12, or cobalamin, is a water-soluble vitamin. Now, usually when we talk about water-soluble vitamins, like, vitamin C or the other B vitamins, the biological rule is use it or lose it.
Right, you just pee them out. If I take a massive dose of vitamin C, my body takes what it needs, and the rest is just expensive urine a couple hours later.
Correct. You can't really store them. But B12 is the exception to the rule. It is a biological oddity. Your body treats it like gold. Your liver actually hoards it.
Hoards it, like a squirrel with nuts for the winter.
Exactly like that. Your liver stores a massive reserve of B12, enough to last you anywhere from 2 to 5 years. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is brilliant, right? If our ancestors went through a famine or couldn't catch game for a long time, they had a backup battery.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm guessing there's a downside to that in the modern clinical setting?
Oh, it's a massive trap. We call it the delayed onset danger. Because you have this huge storage tank, you could stop absorbing B12 today. Maybe you decide to go vegan, or you start a new medication that blocks absorption, and you wouldn't feel the crash for 3 or 4 years.
So you think you're fine, you change your diet, you feel great for a year, 2 years, and you assume, well, clearly I don't need to worry about B12.
Precisely. And the deficiency develops so slowly, so incrementally, that your brain just normalizes it. It's the classic frog in the boiling water analogy. You don't wake up one day feeling terrible, you just feel 1% worse every month.
And you just adjust to that new normal.
You adjust, you think, I guess this is what 45 feels like, or I guess this is what 50 feels like. Until one day, the tank is bone dry and the entire system just collapses.
That is genuinely terrifying. It's a slow-motion car crash that you don't even realize you're in.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So while that tank is slowly draining over all those years, what is actually failing inside the body? Because B12 isn't just doing one job, right? It seems like it has its hands in everything.
It's a major multitasker, for sure. But if we want to understand the symptoms, we really need to focus on two specific mechanisms. I mean, B12 has four main jobs, but two of them really drive the pathology we see. The first one is red blood cell formation.
Okay, the delivery trucks of the body, the oxygen carriers.
Exactly, they carry oxygen everywhere. Now, making a red blood cell requires a tremendous amount of DNA synthesis. You are building a new cell from scratch constantly, millions and millions of them every single second. B12 is the essential fuel for that DNA synthesis. If you run out of B12, the machinery in your bone marrow gets, well, it gets glitchy.
Glitchy how? What does that look like?
Well, the cell prepares to divide. It grows in size. It gets ready to split into two nice, healthy new cells. But without B12, the DNA can't replicate properly to trigger that final division. So the cell just sits there, and it keeps growing. It gets huge.
So it becomes a giant.
We call it megaloblastic anemia. Mega, meaning big. Blast, meaning an immature cell. You end up with these giant, oval-shaped, really clumsy red blood cells. And here's the problem. Your capillaries, the tiny blood vessels that feed your brain and your muscles, they're very, very narrow.
Right.
Normal red blood cells are squishy and small. They fit right through, no problem. These giant B12 deficient cells, they get stuck. They move slowly. They can't deliver oxygen efficiently at all.
So you are literally suffocating on a cellular level, even though your lungs are working perfectly fine.
That is the fatigue mechanism in a nutshell. It's cellular hypoxia. Your tissues are starving for oxygen. But the second job, this is the one that keeps me up at night. This is neurological protection.
The myelin sheath. I remember this from biology class, but let's do a quick refresh for everyone.
So think of the nerves in your body as high-speed fiber optic cables. They run from your brain down your spine all the way to your big toe, and they carry electrical signals at incredible speeds. We're talking about 200 miles per hour. But you can't just have a bare wire. If you stripped the rubber coating off your laptop charger, what happens?
It sparks, it shorts out, the signal gets lost or doesn't even make it.
Exactly. Your nerves are coated in this fatty insulation called myelin. It keeps the signal contained, it protects the nerve, and it massively speeds up the transmission. B12 is essentially the factory manager that maintains that insulation. It is absolutely required to synthesize myelin.
So without B12, the insulation just starts to rot away.
It demyelinates. The rubber coating strips away. And when that happens, the signal slows down. It goes from 200 miles per hour to maybe 5 miles per hour. Or the signal gets garbled. That's the tingling sensation. Or it just stops completely. That's numbness. That is why B12 deficiency looks like a neurological disease. Because, functionally, it is one. You are literally losing your wiring.
Wow. That sets the stage perfectly. So we have a nutrient that protects our blood, our DNA, our energy, and most importantly, our nerves. And when it goes missing, things get very, very weird.
That's an understatement.
This leads us to the core of today's deep dive, the Magnificent Seven. These are the 7 symptoms that you, in your clinical experience, see doctors miss all the time.
All the time. And I want to walk through these carefully because the nuance really matters. The first one is the most common, but it's also the most vague. The unfixable fatigue.
Okay, now everyone is tired. We live in a burnout culture. If I go to my doctor and say, I'm tired, they're going to tell me to sleep more, drink less booze, or manage my stress. How do you distinguish B12 fatigue from just, I have a toddler and a full-time job fatigue?
It has a very distinct quality. Patients describe it as a profound, heavy exhaustion. It's both physical and mental. It feels like gravity has been turned up. But the key differentiator, the real diagnostic clue, is that sleep doesn't fix it. You can sleep 10 hours, wake up, and 2 hours later feel like you just need to lay down on the floor.
And what about caffeine? A cup of coffee.
Caffeine stops working, and that makes perfect sense if you think about the mechanism we just discussed. Why does coffee wake you up? It stimulates your nervous system. But if your fatigue is caused by those giant, clumsy red blood cells failing to deliver oxygen to your brain and muscles, no amount of nervous system stimulation is going to fix that.
You're still hypoxic.
You're still hypoxic. You are oxygen starved at a cellular level. A double espresso cannot fix oxygen starvation.
That is such a great distinction. If a double shot of espresso doesn't even touch your exhaustion, you need to look deeper.
Okay.
Symptom number 2. This is the one that really scares people the most. Cognitive decline and brain fog.
This is where the emotional weight of this condition really hits home. I cannot tell you how many patients I've seen, usually in their 50s or 60s, who come in just terrified. They're forgetting names, they're walking into rooms and don't know why they feel fuzzy. They are convinced, absolutely convinced, that they have early onset Alzheimer's.
Oh, that fear must be palpable. You start planning for the end of your life. You start wondering if you need to sell the house, get your affairs in order.
Exactly. But here's the reality check. In so many of these cases, this is reversible cognitive decline. It's not plaque building up in the brain like in Alzheimer's. It's that myelin sheath fraying. The signals in the brain are just slowing down because the insulation is getting thin.
So the processing speed of the computer has just dropped because the wires are bad.
That's the perfect analogy, correct. A 2023 study in the journal Neurology actually backed this up. It showed measurable cognitive decline in people with low B12 that completely reversed with treatment. And that word reversible is the most beautiful word in medicine.
It's a word of hope.
It is. If we catch it, we can fix it. But I have to warn you, if we leave it for 5 or 10 years, the neurons themselves can die. So, if you feel like your brain is slowing down, please do not just accept it as aging.
That's a huge point. Okay, moving on to symptom number 3. This is a classic B12 sign, but you said it gets misdiagnosed constantly. Peripheral neuropathy. The tingle.
The pins and needles, yes. This usually follows what we call a glove and stocking distribution.
Glove and stocking. What does that mean?
It means it affects the extremities first, like where you'd wear gloves and stockings. It usually starts in the toes or the balls of the feet. Patients describe it as walking on cotton or walking on sponges. They can't quite feel the texture of the floor.
A sort of numbness.
A numbness, a tingling. Then it starts to creep up the legs. After that, it often appears in the fingertips.
And why the feet first? Is there a reason for that?
Yes. It's because those are the longest nerves in your body. The nerve that goes from your lower spine all the way down to your big toe is over 3 feet long. That is a massive amount of surface area to keep insulated. If the body is running low on insulation material, B12, it's going to prioritize the core, the brain, and the spinal cord.
Ah, so the extremities get cut off first.
They do. It's like a city losing power during a blackout. The outskirts go dark long before the city center.
And the big misdiagnosis trap here is diabetes, right?
100%. If a patient comes in with numbness in their feet, the immediate knee-jerk reaction of any doctor is check for diabetes. And that's fair. Diabetes is a major cause of neuropathy. But we know that up to 40% of unexplained neuropathy is actually B12 related.
40%?
Yes. And here's the urgency. Nerves heal very, very slowly. If you let this tingling go on for 6 to 12 months, that nerve damage can become permanent. You might fix the B12 levels later on, but the feeling never fully comes back.
That is a really sober warning. Do not ignore the tingle.
Yeah.
Okay, symptom number 4 takes us out of the physical body and into the mind. The psychiatric mimic.
This is both fascinating and tragic. We often think of depression as purely a chemical imbalance in the brain, but we forget what creates those chemicals in the first place. B12 is absolutely essential for the synthesis of your key neurotransmitters. Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine.
Mood regulators.
The mood regulators. These are the chemicals that make you feel happy, motivated, and calm. When you are deficient in B12, you simply stop making them efficiently.
So you get the symptoms: depression, anxiety, irritability.
Yes, but it presents without a psychological trigger. You aren't depressed because you lost your job or you went through a breakup. You are just chemically depressed. I recall a patient, a 42-year-old woman, who had been on 3 different antidepressants over 2 years. SSRIs, SNRIs. Nothing worked. She was just cycling through them, dealing with all the side effects, feeling completely hopeless.
Because she was trying to treat a hardware problem with a software fix.
That is the perfect way to put it. We ran her blood work, found she had a severe B12 deficiency. We treated it with injections, and within 6 weeks, the depression just lifted. It was like the sun came out. She didn't need Prozac, she needed a nutrient.
That is incredible. It makes you wonder how many people in therapy right now are actually just hungry for B12.
The research suggests it's a significant number. We know people with B12 deficiency are twice as likely to experience severe depression.
Okay, symptom number 5. This connects back to the nerves, but specifically how we move through space. Balance and gait issues.
Yes. This is a condition called subacute combined degeneration of the spinal cord. It sounds really technical, but the mechanism is very specific. B12 deficiency preferentially affects the posterior collars of the spinal cord.
And what do those do?
Those are the massive cables running up the back of your spine that tell your brain where your body is in space. We call that proprioception.
Proprioception. So that's like, if I close my eyes and I raise my hand, I know my hand is in the air without having to look at it.
Correct. Your body has an internal GPS system. B12 deficiency breaks that GPS. When you lose that, you become very unsteady. You start to rely entirely on your eyes to balance.
So if you close your eyes?
You might fall over. A classic sign is someone who suddenly becomes unstable in the shower when they close their eyes to wash their hair. They've lost their visual reference, and their spinal cord isn't telling them where their feet are. Patients report stumbling, feeling clumsy, or developing a wide walk, a wide gait to keep their balance.
And this often gets blamed on what? Inner ear issues.
Inner ear issues, or just frailty in older adults. But if you see a sudden change in your gait, that is a huge red flag for spinal cord involvement.
Okay, symptom number 6 is one of the few that are actually visible to the naked eye. The skin.
Yes. You can get this very specific lemon tint to the skin. It's not the bright orange yellow of severe liver failure. It's much more subtle. It's a combination of two things happening at once. First, you have the pale skin from the anemia. You just don't have enough healthy red blood cells to give you that pink, healthy flush.
Do you look a bit ghostly?
You look pale. But then, because those giant red blood cells we talked about are fragile and poorly built, they break down very easily as they squeeze through the body. When red blood cells break, they release a substance called bilirubin, and bilirubin is a yellow pigment.
So pale plus yellow equals a lemon tint.
Exactly. It's a very subtle jaundice. A little trick I use is to look at the conjunctiva, the inside of the lower eyelid. Pull down your lower eyelid. It should be bright, beefy pink. If it's pale white or has a yellowish cast, I'm immediately thinking B12 deficiency.
And finally, symptom number 7, the oral symptoms.
Glossitis. This is a classic medical school sign, but it's often missed in the real world. The tongue becomes swollen, beefy red, and smooth.
Smooth meaning it loses the little bumps.
Right. You lose the papillae, the tiny little bumps on the surface that give your tongue its normal texture. The tongue can look like a piece of raw steak. And it can be painful, too. Patients describe a burning sensation, like you scalded it on hot soup, but the feeling just never goes away.
And why the tongue? Why not say the nose or the ear?
It's because the cells in your mouth, your mucous membranes, turn over very, very rapidly. They're constantly sloughing off and replacing themselves, and that process requires rapid DNA synthesis. If you lack B12, that replacement process grinds to a halt and the tissue gets inflamed and raw.
So if your tongue feels like it's burning or it looks strangely smooth, don't just drink cold water, check your B12 levels.
Precisely. It could be a major clue.
Okay, so those are the magnificent 7. Unfixable fatigue, brain fog, neuropathy, mood changes, balance issues, the lemon skin, and the beefy tongue. Now let's pivot, because the next logical question is, who is this happening to? We mentioned that 15% statistic earlier. Who are the people in that bucket?
We have to look at what I call the vulnerability profile. It's not random. There are 4 main categories of risk, and I want people to listen very closely to see if they fit into one of these. The first one, and probably the most discussed, is dietary choices.
So we have to talk about the vegan and vegetarian elephant in the room.
We do, and I want to be very clear. I am not anti-plant-based diets. There are many incredible health benefits to eating more plants. But we have to deal with the hard biochemistry. Vitamin B12 is created by bacteria in the gut of animals. It then accumulates in their tissues. Therefore, in nature, it is found almost exclusively in animal products.
Meat, fish, eggs, dairy.
That's it.
But what about things like algae or spirulina or fermented soy products? I see those touted as B12 sources all the time in health food stores. They'll have a big label, plant-based B12.
That is a dangerous, dangerous myth. Those foods contain what we call pseudo B12. It's a molecule that looks like B12 under a microscope, but it is biologically inactive in humans. It doesn't work. In fact, it's worse than that. It can actually block your B12 receptors and prevent the real B12 from working.
So it gums up the lock.
It gums up the lock so the real key can't get in. So no, you cannot get bioavailable B12 from seaweed or tempeh.
The statistics on this are pretty overwhelming, aren't they?
They are stark. Unsupplemented vegetarians have a deficiency prevalence of around 60%. For vegans, it approaches 90%. If you are vegan or vegetarian, you simply must supplement. It is not optional. It is a biological requirement of your diet.
Okay, so that's diet. But what if you're a steak and potatoes person? You eat a burger every other day. You can still be deficient.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, numerically, most of the B12 deficient patients I treat are actually meat eaters. And that brings us to the second major risk factor, age.
And why does age matter so much here?
Because eating B12 and absorbing B12 are two completely different things. B12 absorption is an incredibly complex process. It's like a relay race with multiple steps. First, you need really strong stomach acid to rip the B12 molecule off the protein it's attached to in your food. If you don't have enough acid, the B12 stays locked in the meat and just passes right through you.
And as we get older, our stomach acid levels naturally decline.
Drastically. Once you pass the age of 50, the parietal cells in your stomach just get tired. They produce less acid. We call this atrophic gastritis. But there is a second, even more important player, a protein called intrinsic factor.
Intrinsic factor, that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's a protein that's also produced by the stomach lining. Think of intrinsic factor as a bouncer at an exclusive club. The B12 is the VIP guest. But the B12 cannot get into the bloodstream, the club, without the bouncer personally escorting it. If your stomach stops making the bouncer, the B12 shows up at the door, gets rejected, and leaves via the bathroom.
So you can eat all the liver and clams in the world. But if you don't have the stomach acid and you don't have the intrinsic factor, you are functionally starving for B12.
Functionally starving. You can't get it in.
This leads perfectly into the third risk factor, which is ironically caused by modern medicine itself. Specific medications.
This is huge, and this is where I get frustrated with my own profession sometimes. The two biggest offenders are drugs that millions and millions of people take daily, metformin and acid reflux medications, specifically PPIs.
Let's start with metformin. That's the most common diabetes drug in the world, by far.
It is, and it's a great drug for controlling blood sugar, but biochemically it directly interferes with the absorption of B12 in the lower intestine. It's a calcium-dependent process, and metformin messes with that calcium signaling. We know that roughly 30% of people on long-term metformin will develop a B12 deficiency.
That feels like a cruel joke from a biological standpoint. If you're diabetic, you are already at a high risk for neuropathy, nerve damage from the high blood sugar. Now you take a drug to treat the diabetes, but that drug causes B12 deficiency, which also causes nerve damage.
It's a double whammy. It's a perfect storm for neuropathy. You're trading one type of nerve damage for another if you aren't carefully monitoring your B12 levels.
And what about the PPIs? Proton pump inhibitors, that's your Prilosec, your Nexium, your Prevacid.
These drugs are designed to do one thing and one thing only, stop stomach acid production. But we just established that you need that acid to extract B12 from your food. If you take these drugs for more than 2 years, your risk of deficiency spikes by 65%. You are chemically turning off the first and most critical step of B12 absorption.
That is wild. We are prescribing drugs by the millions that solve one problem, heartburn, but quietly create another, potentially more serious one, neurological decline.
It's a trade-off. But the problem is, doctors often forget to monitor the B12. They just refill the prescription for 10 years straight and never check the tank.
And what's the fourth and final category of risk?
Gut health. Basically, anything that damages the absorption sites in the intestines. Conditions like Crohn's disease or celiac disease create inflammation that prevents absorption, and notably, gastric bypass surgery. If you surgically remove part of your stomach to lose weight, you are physically removing the very cells that make the acid and the intrinsic factor. B12 deficiency is a guaranteed, lifelong issue for bypass patients. They simply cannot absorb it from food anymore.
So we know the symptoms, and we know who is most at risk. Now we get to the part that I think is the most frustrating for patients, the diagnostic gap.
Oh.
Why did the tests fail? You mentioned earlier that standard blood tests can lie. Let's unpack that.
This is the gray zone problem, and it's a huge issue. When you go to your doctor and they order a standard blood panel, they measure your serum B12. This test just measures the total amount of the vitamin floating around in your blood.
And there's a range of what's considered normal on the lab report.
Right, and this varies by lab, but usually the reference range on the lab sheet is something like 200 to 900 pgml. If your result is 201, the computer prints it in black ink, the doctor scans the page, says you're normal, and sends you home.
But 201 is basically running on empty.
It's on the floor. But here's the real kicker. Even levels up to 400 pgml can be deeply problematic. We call this the low normal range. Studies show that up to 30% of people in this range, people who were told they are fine, actually have a functional deficiency at the cellular level.
Okay, the discrepancy. Why would there be B12 in the blood, but it's not actually doing its job in the cells?
Because the serum test is crude. It measures total B12. It counts the B12 that is active and ready to be used, but it also counts B12 that is bound up to transport proteins and can't be used by the cells. It counts those inactive pseudo-B12 analogs we talked about earlier. It's like looking at your bank account balance but not knowing if any of the checks you wrote are about to bounce. The money is technically there, but it might already be spoken for or even frozen. It doesn't reflect your actual spending power.
So if the serum B12 test is the check engine light that might be broken, what is the mechanic's professional diagnostic tool? What should we actually be asking for to know the truth?
You need to ask for functional markers. You need a test that tells you if the body is actually struggling to do its B12-dependent jobs. And the gold standard here is a test called MMA methylmalonic acid.
MMA. That sounds like a fighting sport. Tell us about this molecule.
So here is the biochemistry, simplified. Your body produces MMA as a byproduct of metabolism. Vitamin B12 is required to then break down and get rid of that MMA. It's an enzyme cofactor. If you have plenty of B12 in your cells, your MMA levels are very low because the B12 is constantly cleaning it up.
But if you run out of B12,
the MMA starts to pile up. It can't be cleared, so it spikes in your blood and your urine.
it's a perfect inverse relationship. Low cellular B12 equals high MMA.
Exactly. And MMA doesn't lie. It doesn't care how much B12 is floating around in your blood. It only reflects what is happening inside the cell where it actually matters. If your MMA is high, your cells are starving for B12, period, regardless of what the serum test says.
That is such a critical takeaway for the listener.
Huh.
If you have the symptoms, the fatigue, the fog, the tingle, and your doctor says your B12 is 300, you're fine. Do not accept that. You have to ask for the MMA test.
Correct. Insist on it. It's the tiebreaker. There are other markers, too, like homocysteine, which also elevates when B12 is low. And we can look at the MCV on your standard blood count. That tells us if the red blood cells are getting huge. But MMA is really the definitive proof.
Okay, let's say we've done the detective work. We have the symptoms, we fit the risk profile, and the MMA test confirms it. We are deficient. How do we fix it? What is the protocol?
The good news is B12 is incredibly easy to treat. It's cheap and it's remarkably effective. But the method of delivery matters immensely. We have three main routes: oral, sublingual, and injection.
Let's start with oral. Just pop in a pill.
Oral supplements, usually in high doses like 1,000 to 2,000 micrograms, are great for maintenance or for mild deficiency, specifically if the cause is purely dietary. If you are a young, healthy vegan with a perfectly functioning gut, a pill works just fine. Your absorption machinery works, you just need to put the fuel in the tank.
But if you have one of those absorption problems we talked about, the low stomach acid, the lack of intrinsic factor, the metformin usage, swallowing a pill won't work, right? Because you can't absorb it through the gut.
Exactly. You're just swallowing an expensive pill and passing it out the other end. That's where we step up to sublingual B12.
Under the tongue.
Right. These are tablets or liquid drops that you put under your tongue and let them dissolve. The idea is that the B12 gets absorbed directly into the rich network of blood vessels in the mouth, the mucosal lining, and bypasses the stomach and digestive system entirely. This is a much better option for moderate issues or people with known gut problems.
But you, in your practice, are a huge fan of the third option, the injection.
The shot. This is the heavy artillery. And frankly, this is the gold standard, especially if there are any neurological symptoms present. If a patient comes to me with numbness in their toes, balance issues, or severe brain fog, I am not messing around with pills or drops. I don't want to guess if they are absorbing it. I need to flood their system with B12 immediately.
And why is the shot so much more effective?
It puts the B12 directly into the muscle, usually the arm or the glute, and from there it goes straight into the bloodstream. No stomach acid required. No intrinsic factor required. It is 100% bioavailability guaranteed. We typically start with what's called a loading dose protocol.
What does that look like in practice?
We usually do one injection per week for about a month or two. We are aggressively refilling that liver storage tank we talked about at the beginning. Once that tank is full and the symptoms begin to improve, we can switch to a less frequent monthly maintenance shot.
And what does the recovery timeline look like? Because I imagine people who feel this terrible want to feel better overnight.
We absolutely have to manage expectations here because different systems in the body heal at very different speeds, energy and mood. That bounces back fast, usually within 2 to 4 weeks. Patients often say, I feel like a veil has been lifted. It can be very dramatic.
It's encouraging.
It is. Cognition takes a bit longer, maybe 4 to 12 weeks for the fog to really clear and for words to come back easily. But the neuropathy, the nerve damage, that is the slow burn.
Because nerves grow so slowly.
Painfully slow. Nerves regenerate at a rate of about 1 millimeter per day. If you have damage in your feet, it can take 3 to 6 months, sometimes even longer, to feel a significant difference.
And sometimes it doesn't come back at all.
Sometimes not at all. If the damage has been there for years and years, we might stop it from getting worse, but we might not get you back to 100%. That is why I harp on early detection. Do not wait until you can't feel your feet to finally get treated.
Right. What about diet? Once we are treated and feeling better, how do we stay fixed? What should we be eating to maintain our levels?
If you aren't vegan or vegetarian, the superfoods are organ meats. Beef liver is the undisputed king. A single 3-ounce serving of beef liver has something like 3,000% of your daily value of B12. It's nature's multivitamin.
So liver and onions is making a comeback.
It really should. If you can't stomach liver, clams are also incredible, one of the highest non-organ meat sources. Salmon, beef, and eggs are all very good sources as well. If you are plant-based, nutritional yeast is your best friend, provided it is fortified. You have to check the label to make sure.
A very important question.
Yeah.
Is there any danger here? Can I overdose on B12? If I take a shot and it turns out I didn't really need it, will I explode?
No. That is the beauty of it. B12 is water-soluble, and it is virtually non-toxic. There is no established upper toxicity limit. If you inject 5,000 micrograms and your body only needed 100, your kidneys just filter out the excess and you pee it out.
So you'll have expensive urine.
You will have very expensive, bright pink urine, but you will be perfectly fine. It is infinitely safer to treat a suspected deficiency than it is to ignore it.
That is really reassuring. So when in doubt, check it and treat it.
Absolutely. The risk of inaction is far, far greater than the risk of action.
This has been a massive download of information. Let's try to summarize the key insights before we wrap up. What are the big takeaways you want the listener to walk away with?
First, and most importantly, remember the great masquerader. B12 deficiency looks like depression, it looks like Alzheimer's, it looks like MS, it looks like chronic fatigue. Do not automatically assume your symptoms are just aging or stress.
Dig deeper.
Dig deeper. Second, respect the risk factors. If you are over 50, if you are vegan or vegetarian, or if you're on medications like metformin or PPIs, you are in the danger zone. You need to be proactive.
And
Third, do not blindly trust the normal reference range on a standard blood test. If you are in that 200, 400 range and you feel like garbage, demand an MMA test. It is the only way to know for sure what's happening at the cellular level.
And finally, act fast if you confirm a deficiency.
Yes. Time is tissue. The longer your nerves go without their insulation, the harder it is to repair them.
I want to leave our listeners with a provocative thought that came up for me while I was researching this. We have millions of elderly people in nursing homes right now. Many of them are confused, they're unsteady on their feet, they're depressed, and they're profoundly tired. They're being treated with antipsychotics, sedatives, walkers, and antidepressants. How many of them, just based on the sheer statistics of age and medication use, are simply suffering from a lack of a vitamin that costs pennies to treat?
It's a haunting question, isn't it? The medical system is set up to treat the symptom, the fall, the mood, the memory loss, rather than the root cause. We could potentially empty an entire wing of a nursing home just by checking MMA levels and giving B12 shots. It's a paradigm shift that we desperately need to make.
That is a thought to chew on. Listen, if you found this deep dive valuable, if it gave you an aha moment today that might help you or a parent or a friend, please do us a huge favor, subscribe to the channel right now. It signals to us that you want more of this deep, detailed, no-nonsense health analysis. We have so many more topics just like this one to cover, but we need you on board with us.
Yes, please subscribe. Knowledge is health, and we want to keep sharing it.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.